Hey guys, what's good? So glad you're here to check out this video about basketball speed training with Coach Adam Menner from Varsity House Hoops and Varsity House Gym over in New Jersey. I've had a chance to go there, so I met Adam in person. He's a legit coach. He practices what he preaches, and Joe and Dan, all those guys at Varsity House are great coaches, number one, and they are caring and they put you and the athlete's needs first. So this is information that's going to help you be a better athlete, be a better coach. And anyways, there's a timestamp in the video down below along with our explosive athlete template. If you need to, go download that. But there's a timestamp in case you need to get to things. At the very end, Coach Adam doesn't hold anything back. He kind of lays out a program of what how he sequences his training, and kind of lays out a sample program for you to take with you. So it's tons of knowledge bombs. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and follow the guys over at Varsity House. They're top notch. We've got Coach Adam Menner here from Varsity House Hoops and Education, Business to Strength. These guys are in New Jersey. He's a top-notch coach. I've gone there personally to do their Business of Strength seminar. It was wonderful. But anyways, our main topics that he's going to talk about today is obviously speed development for basketball specifically, and more so the cognitive part. So like kind of really understanding it and applying it in the sport situation versus just closed, refined cone drills that we typically think of when we're doing speed and agility training. Anyways, I'm super excited to have you here, Adam. And so yeah, if you want to tell people about what a day in the life looks like, kind of what you do, and anything else I might have left out.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, appreciate it so much, Josh, for having us on. Like he said, we connected business to strength, but even before that, we were talking on social media a little bit. I think before it led to that. And I
Yeah.
always preface it with this, social media is an amazing tool. And I'm a big fan because when you use it the right way, you actually build real relationships with people and you get to learn and talk and build like a community, which is, where the industry is going anyway. So why not just hop on the train and really just maximize it and don't use it for the negative reasons, really use it for positive reasons. So that's cool. But yeah, just about me, what's going on. So I'm kind of in a unique spot. I'm the director of performance here at Varsity House Gym. I work with everyone from youth, novice, high school, all the way up to D1 All-Americans and some NBA athletes as well. But I also have a private company called the Business of Strength, which is really just education and career development for anybody in the industry, and that covers training but also some business stuff as well. So I'm kind of got my hand in both, but one feeds the other. So it's a lot of fun, it's a lot of work, but I'm super passionate about what I'm doing.
That's awesome. Because yeah, I mean, just touching base on what you said too is like I had no idea who Varsity House was until I think you were following me on Instagram. I'm not sure, but then you just sent me a message. It was super genuine, and so anyways, I love finding coaches like that to connect with, which is why I wanted to talk a little bit more about this basketball
Yeah.
training stuff. But obviously, it applies to all the sports. We know that. Or I guess what made you kind of obviously we know the typical closed speed and agility drills where people just do cone stuff back and forth. But
Mhm.
I guess what made you kind of seek out that next level, or what kind of things led you to find this next part that we're going to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think I should preface this with I'm not a doctor, right? But neurology really has interested me because of the way it controls everything that we do in athlete performance. So I used to just look at things like through the traditional lens: get faster, lift weights, jump higher, make sure you can move good. Okay, we're all done. But when you peel back the layers of an athlete or a human, in any regard, you start to see that the brain controls all. And I think as coaches, we operate under a zero stress assumption, meaning like they just come in, they can do whatever they want, and then this is how they train. But when I look at how the body was actually designed and what allows and enables an athlete to reach their maximum genetic potential, you can't skip the brain. So something under that umbrella that really interests me is perceptual cognitive ability, because as we mentioned before, speed is linear, but it's also the most taxing thing that you can do, both from a cognitive standpoint, but also from a motor standpoint and a physical development standpoint. When I look at agility, like you mentioned, you have most people think the 5-10-5. They think the cone drills. They think of all of these other things. But those are just reference points or constraints. And there's an awesome book called Skill Acquisition in Sport and Game Speed by Ian Jeffries. And they really peel back the onion, if you will, on these topics. But I think an athlete should earn the right to move on through their journey. And so I'm going to use this analogy here as, let's say, a basketball player, right? If you're doing your skill work and you have these cones, let's say you're at the top of the key, you have a cone on the left and the right elbow. You're going to come with your left hand inside out to the right cone, crossover, pull up, right, left. Well, those are predetermined positions, but they're never going to emulate live play. But let's say you're in a game, you catch a rebound, you turn around, and there's a defender right underneath you. in that split second, a millisecond, you have to make a decision. And athletes at the highest level have so much experience here that their ability to make quick decisions, they unlock that brain, or that neural e-brake, I call it, and they're allowed to just operate so freely. But most athletes practice in these confined constraints, if you will. So when they actually get to live play, they're like, holy crap, I didn't realize there were so many other things going on. So understanding how those two align, I think is super important as a sports performance coach.
I mean, absolutely, because like you're saying, it's almost like we have those phases. Like, I don't know how about you guys structure your training sessions, but like, step one, again, depends on the athlete age, but like step one, we'll do a closed drill where we're like, hey, this is the kind of skill we're trying to develop, like in a vacuum where everything's perfect.
Right.
I'm gonna show you what to do. Then two, let's take like the constraints off of it. Let's see what you do just in space. And then three, full speed reaction where it's like, hey, we're live against an opponent, and let's see what you see what you got, basically, right? So see if
Yeah.
what you're practicing actually applies.
No, that's exactly it. I mean, you just nailed it on the head. It's how, but I think a lot of coaches don't understand, how does that align in a performance program? Because it's like, all right, I know agility is important. Okay, I know I don't use cones, but like, where do I throw it in? At what points do I use it? What are my volume considerations? So I think that can all be encompassed by simply understanding one simple principle: ground contact time. And when you align your sprints, this is why speed, in my opinion, is the hierarchy of athletic development. But it also, let's just say you look at the sprint up to 50 meters. The initial start, the acceleration start, you're going to spend the most time on the ground. So what do you do with your agility work? Well, it's going to be more close chain, and you're going to spend more time on the ground because it's pre-rehearsed. As you begin to go into your next phase, let's say your power intensification phase, and the athlete begins to get upright, they're going to spend less time on the ground. So what do I do with my drills, my agility drills? I start to remove the constraints. I let them be more reactive and open in nature. Once I get to that last phase, that absolute speed realization phase, what's going to happen is they're going to experience such higher cognitive abilities within the brain, the most amount of force and the least amount of ground contact. So how do I replicate that in my agility drills? Just like you mentioned, I'm going to be having them do these open chain, change of direction. They really have to think, and there's a lot going on. And I think that is where kind of that skill acquisition. And now, no, you don't replicate skill in the weight room, but you have to get constant exposure to them, because if an athlete is out of season and they're not playing their sport for 3 months, research has shown that they will lose their ability to make implicit and explicit decisions. So I think that's why those two align a little bit.
And let's take that, just like zoom in a little bit on that, just in case too, just for
Of course.
terminology. So I guess, what do you mean by implicit and explicit type of, decision?
Sure. Sure. So implicit and explicit comes from that book, The Skill Acquisition in Sport. And basically it's just the difference between pre-rehearsed drills where you see the cone, right? So that's like an explicit decision. And implicit, meaning I have to make that decision myself based off of an external stimulus that I wasn't predetermined. It's just like, I got to make a decision right now, and then I react, basically.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, so it's a very game-like situation, because like, sometimes as a coach, again, as like obviously what we do in the strength conditioning speed type of realm, but also on like the court or the field or whatever sport, is like, the coach isn't on the field with you, so they're just trying to give you as much tools and as much knowledge and wisdom, so that way when you are in that in between those lines by yourself with your teammates, like, hey, we're trusting you and all your preparation you've done all season to make those, like you're saying, implicit decisions in the game flow, right?
Yeah, for sure. And like we mentioned, I mean, I'm not going to get a basketball and have you do cone drills right here on the turf. That's insane. But there is something to be said about training the brain. And I think that's where that stems from, because if they just get constant exposure to being able to make quick decisions, you mean to tell me when they're on the court, excuse me, they won't be able to do the same? It's like, yeah, of course they will, because they've seen it so many times.
Yeah. And like you're saying, you kind of dose that in. So like maybe, let's say you have a 12-week block, right? So in the beginning, say first 4 weeks, probably a little bit more closed chain, still adds some, action and decision making, like you're saying, is doing. But let's say it's like 80-20 cone versus open, and then maybe 50-50, and then maybe 80-20, 80 open, and then 20 like, closed chain drills. Because again, like they get bored, so they shut down if we just do cone drills all day, because you get so bored and you're like, I can do this sleeping, right? And you're not challenged, so they shut down. Versus, like you're saying, more mimicking sport, getting more specific, more realized to the imposed demands of them. So is that kind of
No, that's exactly it. I think, the only thing you might be missing there are volume considerations and also preparing for collision, because I use this analogy as well. The body does not absorb force, right? It's like you have two immovable objects that are coming together. The stronger one is going to win, i.e. the ground. So if you don't, that's why we strength train. That's why we make sure we do all these things. But you can do those things in the realm of agility, speed, and power. And so how would you do that? I think when for volume considerations, if you're going to do agility, I would delegate it to maybe your last training day of the week, the first thing that you do, and you start with more of like falling series and bracing series, meaning like have your athletes stand on the line. They're going to fall. They bring their right foot out. They're replaced, steps in, they stand up, they go back. And all I'm doing is getting these athletes used to handling their body weight moving in all planes, right? So you want to do like the frontal plane, sagittal, transverse plane, and just have them fall and just plant in different things because they're not absorbing force. You're just getting the tendon being able to move in those different array of motions, because twofold, power is plane specific as well. So when agility comes, right, agility is very taxing on the body, like just cutting, lowering your hips. So like, where's my time best spent? Developing speed and power. But we know that this has a certain level of proven success. So we need it in the program. But I would delegate, like you said, maybe 10 to 20% of it, on one day. And then as it gradually gets on, yes, you will open, but you have to make sure that that volume matches everything else. So I wouldn't do like the most amount of agility work, even if it's open chain later in a block. It must be very controlled, and the volume might have to be a little bit lower because the output in the physical wear will be higher as well.
Right, we're building off of last week. This time we're adding a new component, but we have to make sure we go through the whole process before we get there. Right, so you're gonna fall. So I'm gonna lean, and I'm just gonna fall at the guy. So, right, Jack's in front of me. I'm just gonna fall. I'm looking at him though, so I see him, and I'm just gonna take as many other steps as it takes. Because very seldom, unless you're a basketball player, like a closeout at the top of the key, do you chop it up, right? I'm just running all the time, so that's why we do all of that. A lot of our plants are off of one leg, so that was a regression to this. So I'm gonna fall, I take my steps, and then I'm gonna plant, right, and then I'll stand up.
Right, and even because most of the kids you're probably training too, and like is like we do, is like they're still training their sport, which they get all that agility stuff or change of direction stuff like in the game environment. So like so it's almost feel like personally, again, when I coach athletes, I almost feel like I have to do a little bit less of that just because I already know they're getting so much of that wear and tear and stuff. But like you're saying, your biggest points where you can make impact on the youth kids and athletes is like teaching them the how and the why and slowing things down for them versus them just going to the sport and just going through it.
Yeah, I think that is the key. And especially like during the off season, maybe you could do a little bit more agility work because they're not playing as much. But then like that whole totality of volume that an athlete accumulates over the entire year definitely has to be taken into an account, especially with basketball players because of AAU basketball, skill training sessions, them just going to the park. So like they get a lot of that stimulus. So like you said, I regress a lot of the things that I'm doing, and I just make sure that like, all right, let me just see, like, I'm going to push, like, not literally, but like, I'm just going to have you fall. Let me see what you do. And it's like, if I can see that they're not ready to take that next leap, then maybe we'll spend a little bit of time correcting some of those things. But other than that, yeah, exactly, is volume is a huge consideration when it comes to agility work.
Yeah. So what are one or two things that you might, have had in a situation with an athlete that or like one or two key points that you feel a lot of athletes mistake or like you have the opportunity to coach them on? So like one example for me was like, little switches in their brains. Like I'll tell them when they're sprinting, again, this could be change direction or not, but like, hey, I want you to contact the ground before the ground hits you type of thing. Right. So it's like you're on the offense and you're not waiting till you're on the ground to make a decision, right? You're already like go. And so that way when you hit, you kind of ricochet and be that basketball versus like a tomato.
Right. No, that's a good cue as well. I think one of the biggest cues that I try to relate to athletes is actually the ability to relax. Just because a lot of athletes live in extension. I was actually talking to one of our coaches earlier that, if you live in extension, you always are maintaining some type of sympathetic tone, meaning like either parasympathetic or sympathetic, meaning you're always turned on, you're always wired. And then you start to develop these athletes with anterior pelvic tilts. It lengthens the hamstring. So when they run, they're not relaxed because they can't breathe. They don't have good posture. And two, their gait cycle will always be off. And I see a lot of overstriding with athletes. But traditional strength and conditioning would tell you, hey, we just got to go in there and like fix your low back of your hamstring, instead of being like, no. Here's what they need. They need to just relax a little bit more, right? So we do a lot of breathing and posture work at the beginning, and in between a lot of like our our pattern and push drills, I'm actually teaching them to relax. So it's like inhale, exhale, almost like an oscillatory exercise where it's like during this A skip, you're going to inhale, exhale. And I'm just getting them to lightly and understand how that whole process works.
Yeah, it's definitely like a science and art form, like you're saying, because it's like you want, there's so many things that you're already knowing, but it's like, what's that one thing I just give them? Because obviously we know once you overload, then you think it, then you look extra robotic and stiff.
Of course.
So what was I gonna say? Is I seen something great from, I think on Instagram, like Bill Miller. He does a lot of baseball stuff, but he posted like rowing, like a long toss program recently. But it had, like the one cue, like this one small thing, because like all the great athletes make what they do look effortless, right? That's what we want. Like how you can really tell someone's masterful at what they do. And his was like, hey, throw this as far as you can, but as easy as you can. So making it look, you know what I mean? So it's like those little things of like, do this and go as fast as you can, but at the same time, like I want you to look like effortless and like you're floating, right? Not like like tense up and hit or whatever.
I think too, because athletes think they have a very weight room minded mentality, meaning in the weight room, you can will yourself to squat 500. Right? You can keep grinding, keep pushing, keep bracing, chest up, whatever cue you give. When you sprint and you jump, you can't will yourself to be faster, jump higher. It comes very naturally. So how can I evoke that natural reaction? Well, I have to get them internally to be able to just relax, feel comfortable. And that's where it all comes back to the brain, right? And removing that neural e-brake, because a lot of novice athletes, novice not meaning not experienced, but like a lot of guys who aren't at the pro level, everything is so serious to them. Everything is like, I got to do this. I got to run as fast as I can, all this. Whereas like if I work with an NBA pro, that dude strolls in, he's very relaxed. He's talking to some of the girls on his cell phone. But then as soon as I ask him to start sprinting and jumping, the dude looks like a gazelle and he's perfect, because their brain, they always are in this one state of mind, this relaxed state where it's like, they're not too high, they're not too low. And I think one of the cool things is like LeBron James in 2016, game 6, when it was tied 3-3, and they asked him, are you concerned or are you worried at all? And I just remember he has the sunglasses on and he's literally just sitting back in his chair with his arms crossed. And he's like, no, I'm going to get some shots up tonight and I'll be good for tomorrow. And this is game 7, NBA finals. When you look at it like us, like if you or I were in that boat, I'd be like puking in the trash can next to me. I'd be like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Oh my gosh, all the lights are on, all the pressure, this and this. They don't think like that. And that's sometimes why you get like, when you see an athlete in like that high leverage moment, I'm not saying they don't get nervous. They just don't feel the same, because that is what makes them so elite. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah, 100%. So something that brought to my mind, again, I don't know what game it was because I wasn't into basketball that much, as I know you're definitely more a basketball guy, but like when Damian Lillard pulled up and hit like that one from almost like half court, you know what I mean? Just
live
in that moment, you know what I mean? Because
against the Thunder too, like he's literally just hanging out. Paul George is guarding him. He's just lulling him to sleep. He hits that shot. He just turns around and is like, that was cool.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I'm running around taking my shirt off. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, I'm the man. It's like, no, that's cool. No, next.
Yeah.
And that's why, too, if you want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit, is like, that's why you look at a lot of athletes, a lot of the issues that they have off the court, like gambling and all of this stuff, is because there's no sense of consequences. Their neural e-brake is so removed that their whole life just stays within these guardrails. And they're just like, I perform at a high level, I lose, it's okay. I gamble really high, I lose, it's okay. Now, granted, not everybody stems there, but you can see a lot, and there's a lot of cool research and books that kind of show that these guys at the highest level, that they just operate differently than you or I. I think speed, though, the real quick thing with speed, I think creating a training program and the organization of context is super important, because like I think what happens is like a lot of coaches read a lot and they get paralysis by analysis,
Yep.
but they're trying to create new things. But it's like, you have to just have a template that flows, and anything that you read or what's new, you just kind of fill in and adjust. And you're like, oh, I was doing this here. Let me take this out and put this back over here. So I think in terms of a training session and the organization of like how something flows, what do you typically recommend? And then, I'll go from there for like what we usually do here as well.
So like, what is our training session typically?
Yeah, like a sprint day training session, day one.
Yeah. So when we set up like our training session for, our athletes here, it's pretty simple. Like we'll come in, I'll just keep it super, I don't have to be like overly coachy and like, 'cause there's so many people like, death to the warm up. Like it's
Yes.
specified joint prep, you know what I mean? Which I get and I do believe, you know what I mean? But just dealing with high school kids and like keeping it simple. So obviously we'll come in, I'll have them do some sort of foam rolling typically just to get them loose and like you're saying, more relaxed than anything, just loose, see how they're feeling for the day, check a pulse on them. If they're talking or if they're like, if they're closed out and on their phone and being quiet, what already, you get that feedback instantly as a coach and you pick up. So anyways, foam roll, we'll do some sort of mobility activation. So like, maybe some hip flexor, hamstring rockers, stationary on the ground, just moving, just getting loose. And then do some activation stuff like hips, calves, ankles, stuff like that. Go into some sort of dynamic warm up just to get the blood flowing, get their temperature up. From there, I kind of, like you're saying, I kind of fill out the session. So like maybe they're dead, so I want to play some sort of game. So
Right.
like, let's do some sort of game, like, elbow tag or shin tag just to get them in a different state. That's the most powerful thing I've been looking to honestly put into my program more is like, how do we have more fun, right? Training should be fun. And I also want them to look forward to. Thankfully, they do have fun when they're here. But anyway, so I might go to a game. I always try to incorporate a game some way, shape, or form. So anyways, some sort of game. And then after I get their attention and like they're actually like, kind of neurologically firing basically, it's like, okay, then I probably have a better chance of going into technique stuff because guess what? Now I got their attention so they can actually retain the stuff. So now we'll maybe do a breakout session of the technique thing that I want to do for the day. And then we'll hit some application, like meaning, okay, like we just did a simple wall drill, right? Or a load and a lift. All right. You know how that lift sensation? All right, let's apply that to our 10-yard sprint real quick, right? So anyways, kind of like that. And then based off what I see from there, you know what I mean, is like we can just build upon that, just go based off what I see with the athletes sometimes, like you're saying. It's like you have your plan and your structure, but then you have the autonomy to go where you feel like the session needs to go with who you got that day.
Yeah, I mean, there's a cool quote. I forgot where I read it, but it was like plan, freestyle, record, right? I mean, plan, record, freestyle. So it was like, of course, you kind of know what you want to do, but then like you just said, yeah, you're going to make those adjustments right there on the fly. And I think that's super important. It's almost like the coach's eye, holds all power, I think is real important.
Yeah, it really is important just to be good at what you do.
Yeah. And that only comes though, but like in all reality, that only comes through experience, like you could read all these things in a textbook, which is great. I'm a bookworm, but like, I'm so fortunate because then I have like this little mini science experiment where I'm like, that worked, that didn't, that was cool, that didn't. And then you just start over time formulating and you really just see what works and what doesn't.
Yeah. So like, that's a great example. There's so many points I want to go off what you just said. But like one thing I know, for example, that typically I found that hasn't worked well for me is like doing like some sort of resisted sprint and then doing some sort of like, or like a heavy resisted sprint, I should specify, and then some sort of like unresisted sprint.
Like a contrast sprint almost, right? Like a French contrast sprint, but using resistance for the speed.
Exactly. So let's say we had like a good 200-pound size kid, like say he has like 130 pounds or 90 pounds on the sled and they do a 10-yard sprint and then, take it off and go do a 10. Like typically what I found is like the kids always stumble and they always like, falling. So I'm like, that doesn't really work too well. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, maybe I'll just do a lighter sprint or maybe I just won't do that. Or maybe I'll do a couple warm-ups before I actually hit a full one type of thing, so he's got to play with it and finesse it out a little bit.
For sure. And even to that point too. So something that I don't do at all is the French contrast method. And that's because when you look at the spine and the core and like when you actually think about, all right, what was the core designed to do, right? Like what is the role of the core? A lot of people are say like, oh, all it does really is it protects your extremities while you're or protects the spine while your extremities are in motion. And it's like, okay, because that's the balsamic maneuver, right? I inhale and I expand and I feel the void in my belt. But reality is like when you look at the core, truly using your core, talk about getting out of extension and more into flexion, is you want to exhale. You're anchoring the ribs to the pelvis. You should have no excessive anterior pelvic tilt. You should have 360-degree of expansion during inhalation. And then also there's eccentric abdominal bracing, right? And nobody really thinks about the core in that manner. But when you look at it from an anatomical standpoint and what it was truly designed to do, you know that's the case. So I say that to say, because during contrast method, you know, lift a heavy load and then go do something freestyle or reactive, like an extensive or dynamic movement. But you're asking, based off of what you just told me, to expand air, fill the void, and compress the spine while my extremities are in motion. But what is athletic movement? Athletic movement is more about being free, being relaxed, and a lot of spinal waving, because you need to be able to get into all these other positions. Mm-hmm. So I might have an athlete who's lifting 225 to 315 for as fast as they can, being compressed, to then exerting as much force where we have decompression in the spine. And what I found is we had a lot of athletes that were getting back pain, hip pain, knee pain, and a lot of that wasn't acute, like right there in the spot, but it became chronic because over time I was asking for compression, decompression, compression, decompression. What was happening is the core wasn't acting properly and was kind of unaligning the pelvis a little bit. These guys were walking weird, their gaits were off, our times were off a little bit in the sprint. So the case study was like French contrast method for me, I guess, just to put it point blank, is a no-go for those reasons.
So do you do any sort of contrast training period, or are you just like?
If it is, it might be like, I don't know, an isometric hold into a jump, but like a non-counter movement jump. So like I might hold the hex bar along the pins inside a rack for a 5 count and then go off and do one jump, but not repeated jumps, because it's like brace really tight, squat, and then go do my jumps where I'm doing this. Yep. And you're asking the spine to be like a slinky, you know? And so that, just from an anatomical standpoint, caused a lot of athletes a lot of pain. So I removed those about 2 years ago. But I'm actually going to come out with like a formal piece, I think, on that, just to give people a little bit of a better understanding.
Well, that's what you're saying. It's interesting experience, but something you've witnessed yourself. So that's a powerful thing. But also, just in case people don't know what French contrast is, basically some sort of like heavy loaded movement paired with some sort of type of power, paired with like another light loaded movement, paired with like unload, basically. There's different ways you can do it. But anyways, it's kind of get all the different points of like the force velocity curve, like heavy, medium, light, and unloaded.
Exactly. And, you know, and it also comes down to, I think, another reason, subsequent reason of that is potentiation, right? Like PAP training. Mm-hmm. But in my opinion, PAP training is like, just means like you're really warmed up. Yeah. Like you're playing games and these kids' nervous systems. Yeah. And if you're playing games and these kids' nervous systems are really high, that is PAP training. So like when you say like, okay, the definition by science with PAP training is I have to go against an immovable object to get everything firing. So my brain perceives there as a external barrier, so that when I actually go out and run, there's nothing there, that my brain will act like the gates are released and then I can jump a little bit higher. But that really just stems to like, did I do all my like prep work? Are my kids' nervous systems good? Are they sweating? Did I do all my pattern work and my push work? And are they moving good? Okay, good, dude. You're prepared, right? Because that's essentially what it is. So
yeah, just got that heightened state ready to go.
And that's all. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah. So is there any ways that you found with your athletes? Because like you're saying, I was talking to like, I found games work very well. So like, yeah. I'm sure kids engage in some sort of way. Just engagement, I guess, is PAP training basically. So I guess, is there anything you found that you've done, whether in a small group? I feel like it's easier almost in a group than it is, I feel like, individually.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, the energy going on. So I guess anything that you've done to help athletes get in that, you know, state to get them engaged and ready?
Yeah. I mean, some of the things that we include in our warm-ups are a little weird. So it's like, what we like to do is like, you know, I follow this template. So just going back to the initial point is like, they come in. No, I mean, I forgot myself, but they come in, we do a lot of like, I don't want to call it brain work, but getting into the right positions. So like single leg stance, maybe they do some self-myofascial work just so they perceive themselves to feel good. After that, we'll do like what I call like a human health hygiene. I'm just getting into different positions to allow them to get some decompression in the spine, breathe to get them into flexion. There's some specific stuff that I do there. Then we stand up and get right to a dynamic warm-up. And I follow this template. So it's like pattern drills, which is like your A skips, your B skips, and all that stuff. Then your posture drills, which is anything like a broomstick, arm drives, and then our push drills, which is exactly like you mentioned, attack the ground first before the ground attacks you. So that's like a lot of front side mechanics, just getting them used to putting the force into the ground. So that's kind of like that warm-up section. Now the asterisk next to that, I guess, if you will, is where sometimes we include some fun things like a pattern drill. I might have them do like some type of weird skip, like dance in there. So like they're trying to figure it out and they're engaged, and I can see like the brain is going a little bit, like you mentioned. So I'm like, okay, cool. Now I know they're engaged, and let's get to some of the important stuff. That then is followed up by like their sprint warm up. Then we do our main sprints. I do power after sprinting. So I do my jumps based on the sprint. So if we're sprinting linearly on Monday, then after that, their subsequent work might be whatever phase we're in, right? So if I'm in that acceleration phase, that longer ground contact time, I'm doing non-counter movement based jumps, or I'm doing like weighted jumps. And then as they progress through there, I kind of follow suit. But after we do our power work, that's then where I do some of my strength work. And then I like to do some special exercises, like a lot of like ankle work, just because I found too, with like females specifically, ankle and posterior chain work. Everybody and their mother is strong, like a strong squatter and deadlifter. Mm-hmm. So when you have like axial loading of the hip structure coming down, if your ankle structure is not strong, you're losing support because your ankles are the conductor between your hip and the ground. So like if you don't have strong feet and strong ankles, but you're a really good squatter and deadlifter, your ankles are going to take the brute force of that. And that's where I've seen a lot of women like have ACL injuries or like ankle injuries. And then I usually finish up with some type of conditioning work as well. So
yeah. Ankles are definitely underrated, kind of more hot topic right now with everything.
For sure.
Plus, like, youth sports, like you guys do a lot too, is like, they just put slap ankle braces on, which is like the worst thing, you know what I mean? So anytime you can take it out, decompress it, move it, get it actually strong and through those ranges of motion, like you're saying, is like, I think that'll severely reduce, especially parents who have female athletes, like middle school, high school, reduce that chance, because it is a very unfortunate injury.
Yeah, I mean, there is like, it's crazy too. I mean, you see it just as much. So it's like, I call it the youth sports epidemic, where it's just so many kids are playing sports at earlier and earlier ages. And, I almost feel like they're being thrown into that. And then this is also something that I feel kind of passionate about is that a lot of the kids nowadays are so technologically driven that when they come to see us, we have to spend even more time on the basics, because like agility work in games are almost more beneficial, because think about when we were younger, we were playing like manhunt, tag, games in the dark, block parties, running around with kids. So we get into a weight room, I can just move whatever. Like this is what I do all the time. But these kids have so much central focus. They spend so much time on technology that when they get in there, they like lose stability, they lose balance, and they're like 10. So like agility work is like, for me, for youth kids, depending on how much they play, is super important. But
yeah, no, absolutely, man. I actually had one lady just texted me on Instagram saying, "Hey, I tore my ACL this last year, high school soccer player, any exercises I can do, so it's like, geez, it's the worst thing you can hear."
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we actually I had the same thing with a girl, and it immediately makes me think like, what was the training like? What was she doing? What did we do? Where did I go wrong? But in reality, it's like sometimes like, no, dude, she was just prepared. It just happened.
Yeah. Circling back to like what you were saying is like the implicit and explicit.
Mm-hmm. Implicit versus explicit. Yep.
So between those two, do you think it comes down to just rehearsal of the implicit, of like doing that 90-degree elbow turn and cut or whatever it is? Like rehearsing that so much time so that it naturally comes out to explicit? Or I guess is there ways that you add to that drill to make it more like explicit, like you're saying? So obviously you rehearse it with the implicit, drill it, cones, blah, blah, blah. And then you just hope that it naturally comes out? Or is there something that you add to your training or with the athletes to, I guess, gamify it a little bit more? Or
yeah, so I think with that, it just comes down to like exposure though. So I'm looking at like, all right, what's the end goal for these guys? Like, how can I get them, like, where do I need them to be? And that talks about too with you, like the power observation. So like, let's say you have a kid that comes in, and that's why also for me personally, I'm a big believer in proprioception training, because the reason you need proprioception training is it's not like, hey man, we need to work on your balance on a basketball. I'm not saying like we're going to go to that extent, right? That's kind of insane. But I think it's important, not that extent, but I think it's important because I look at like what kids are doing on a daily basis. Let's say you have one kid who plays one sport and then he comes in the weight room and during your warm-ups, let's say they're barefoot and you're like, hey, this is a D3 football player. He's pretty good. And you're like, we're going to do 5 single leg ground touches. So like just like a single leg RDL where he has to touch down. If that kid cannot even do 1 rep and he's like really shaky, that doesn't tell me like, oh, you're losing stability, man. Like you have weak ankles and feet. Let's go in there. That tells me that like your brain is seeking the ground for stability. So you need higher cognitive work because you're operating, like not to sound mean, but like you're operating down here. I need you up here right now. So like that's where like you just said more games, including things in the warm up, like this is kind of cool off the cusp, but like one of the things that I've done is like a barefoot agility game warm up. Talk about everything that you need, stability of proprioception, turning the brain on a little bit. And that's done in earlier phases on that day 3. But I think that that is so important because again, it just goes back to the hierarchy of the brain and how it controls everything in the kid's body. And that's why for me, I always say I'm not a neurologist, but I've been reading a lot more over the last 3-4 years because like when you really understand it and you tie it back to training, you're like, holy crap, that does make a lot of sense. And then there's a lot of research to back it up. In 2016, 7 studies alone were published that kids that practice proprioception training ranging from novice pro athletes were 33% like less likely to get injured. And that's just because their brains were turned on, they had good stability. And think about in a game, like young kids and like some kids get hurt because they simply lack the ability to make like decisions quickly. Mm-hmm. Like they're just like on the field, they see something, they're like, oh, and it's so slow and they move the wrong way as opposed to like a kid who's like super with it. He's like in it, he can make quick decisions. He's seen it so many times because his brain's operating at a higher level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. So it's like you'll typically run into 2 situations like that. Is like one, the kid who might be like technical smart and he sees the play, but he lacks the physical skills to get there.
Exactly.
So power strength. Or vice versa, where he has maybe the speed, but he doesn't have the technical awareness of the game or like the perception of what's going on to get there, right? So it's like,
yeah, exactly. That's my point. But like you see that during like your warm-ups, you see that in earlier phases. And that's why I use that example. That's why like I think there's a lot of wrong connotations associated with certain drills. Like you see like you're gonna do a single leg ground touch. You're like, you have weak knees. It's like, no, dude, like his brain, like he's actually like, he's like very like central focused and he can't see the bigger picture. Whereas like you watch some of these basketball players, I guarantee you Kyrie Irving can stand on one leg pretty well and touch the ground no problem, right? Because he operates at such high levels in games, changing direction all the time that like he looks like a freaking ballet dancer because he moves so gracefully. So I think that is where you start to see the distinguish between the two.
Yeah, it's easy to separate, you know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So I think
when you have kids coming too, like we have a lot is like when you come in and see them skipping or marching for the first time, you know, some kids will be same arm, same leg, and then you see them shut down because they feel embarrassed if other kids are doing it and they just don't have those foundational skills like you were saying.
Yeah, and like see, like this is you're getting me pumped up right now. So like this is exactly, but like we're answering all the questions, right? That's another drill, like an A skip, same arm, same leg. That kid probably doesn't play like a lot of sports year round and doesn't get exposure to it, where like I could have this little kid come in who's been playing basketball all year round since he was like 7 years old and now he's 12 and he just has so much rhythm and flow and you're like, how does he do that? Like this kid's so good. It's like, no, that kid has been exposed so long that now this is just so easy. He's just kind of hanging out in a controlled environment. So like that is why that's my point is like the guys who are like genetically gifted aren't only like physically gifted, their brains have been exposed to high paces all the time. And like, that's why when you say like, I want my kid to play up in sports, like it's not really the physical component because like between the ages of 6th and 8th grade, a lot of kids are kind of similar, but the mental component, the pace of the game from 6th grade to 8th grade is way different in any level. So like, this kid goes and plays in the 8th grade. He's moving super fast. He has to make his body move faster. And then he goes and plays with all these 5th and 6th graders who are like super slow. And he's like moving super fast. That's the cognitive ability there.
Yeah. So do you think it's good that if they play up? Because obviously, you know, almost being at the next level where it's faster and obviously they're challenged. So therefore they're probably, that's the type of athlete that probably needs that engagement too, because they like being challenged versus
Yeah,
other people that might shut down, you know what I mean? So say the game was too fast for them. So then they just like kind of quit altogether.
exactly.
So
And then
would you
there's a
say,
natural, go ahead, I'm sorry.
oh no, you're good. I was just saying, so would you tell that person to go up to do that? Or would you kind of hold them, keep them that level, just have them stand out amongst their current peers? Or
Yeah, no, I think that they should always go up and try it because it's also a vetting process. If you have a kid, let's say you're a parent out there and you have a son and you're like, he's only in 7th grade. Do I really want him playing with the 9th graders, 8th and 9th graders? Go have him try it, and not for a day, for like a month or 2 months, and see if he does well. And if he starts to excel and starts to adapt, that's a great thing because you know when he comes back to his level, he's going to excel tremendously.
Yeah.
Or you could have the opposite, like you said, where it's like he goes and tries it for 2 months, he just gets annihilated. It's like, well, this kid then needs to step back here. And then we're just going through the athlete life cycle again. Now we can see who's genetically gifted, both mentally and physically, and who's not. And that ultimately will be the vetting process of athletic development.
so if you're an athlete right now, obviously we're kind of quarantined. So what are some proprioception stuff or some things they might be able to do at home to get better, work on their skills and, just with the confines of their room or in the basement possibly, right? So I guess what are some things that might be beneficial?
Yeah, I think too, I don't think we should quite yet knock, just body weight training entirely because if you truly do it right, you could still get a lot stronger just using your body weight. So like, I don't think that you should think like just because you don't have weights that you're not going to get better because in my mind, you probably haven't really trained before, right? Especially if you do some speed and jumps, right? Like go run 8 by 15 yards as fast as you can and take a minute break and then pick a supplemental jump exercise and go as hard as you can and then do some type of single leg skate or squat for a 10-second eccentric for 10 reps each side. Trust me, you won't need a barbell when you're done. So I think though, it's hard to explain certain exercises, and we just created something, the Athlete Performance Code, which is all body weight. I created it a year ago, and it's very weird actually how it's coming right now. Yeah. So, but it's free. So, something if you guys want to check out after this. But I think it comes down to this. Let's pick 3 days. Let's make a mini training program. So you're going to go 3 days. I'm going to make this super simple. Day 1 is going to be your main speed day. Day 2 is your jumping. Day 3 is going to be like your kind of agility day and then your full body strength. So day 1, you can do some type of tempo run. So like whatever, pick a distance, 50 yards down and back, and then progress as such. After that, you can get into some of your like prep exercises. So maybe some power skips, some high knees, some A skips, some B skips. After that, progress into your sprints, 50, 75, 100% through 5 or 10 yards to warm up. Then you're going to do your linear sprints. So like from a 2-point stance, just go 10 yards. Supplement that with some pause jumps. So extend, come down, pause, 3, 2, 1, jump as high as you can, 3 rounds of 3, and then do some main upper body strength work. Day 2, same thing with the warm up, except now you're going to do maybe some more jumping. So now your sprints might be a little bit longer because we might do some like of our longer distance sprints because on Monday was shorter. So maybe now same warm up, you're going to do 15, 20 yard sprints to warm up. Your jumps are going to be more ballistic in nature. So I want you to do like reactive jumps, reactive broad jumps, single leg bounders. You're going to follow that with your lower body strength. So maybe single leg Bulgarians, skater squats, curtsy lunges, anything along those lines.
Body weight.
Yep. And then any type of upper body volume push-ups. We have so many different variations in there that are a lot different and cooler than usual. And then day 3 is some of the agility stuff that we talked about. Maybe you're on a line, fall forward, brace yourself with your left foot, step back, and then maybe do different positions. So you fall left, right, center, all on that one leg. Exactly. Yep. And then you come back to center. And then maybe from there, you just do, if you have a partner, if you're by yourself, I call it a freestyle drill. I've done it myself. You just set up different cones. For 10 seconds, you just make up different combinations. Touch left, center, back pedal, left, right, and you're just going through. You're going to follow that up with full body strength, some push-pull exercise. And then at the end, do some type of conditioning, maybe some type of like HRC or HIC, which is like high interval conditioning. So pick one exercise, go hard for 10 seconds, relax for 20 seconds to a minute, repeat 10 to 15 rounds, and then come back to me and let me know if you need weights.
The ability for athletes, because like you're saying, hey, just sprint. And then sometimes they look at you and they're just like, just run. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, so if you truly know how to tap in to yourself, switch mental gears, And like a sprint, again, you have to be violent. Like it's a,
Yeah.
like who I forget who said it, maybe Dan Paff or something. It's like a mindset before it's a, or it's a belief before it's an action type of thing, right? So it's
Right.
like when I line up and tell kids to go, like, you have to tap into that and you have to switch those gears versus just doing a jog. Of course, you're going to be like, oh, that was easy. Not hard on yourself or like you're trying, because we talked about you have to relax, but you need to be able to turn that power on and like go. Like,
Yeah, for sure. I think, and kids don't, and especially females don't really get that.
yeah,
Like, how long do you spend trying to develop intent with females? Like a long time, right?
mhm.
Because it's like, you'll be like, lift this weight, and they're like super slow, like, but it's heavy, and they do that whole thing. But it's like, really, when they start to tap into like what they're capable of, like then they connect those dots and they're like, oh,
Yeah,
now I get it.
that's a whole nother motivation level too. But something that like I just watched recently on Tony Holler is like, it was like a complete duh moment, is like right from now on, I'm timing every single sprint, like, because I just seen a session where we actually pull the timers out, and then all the kids, I've seen the competitives come out, and the guys are
Yeah.
hitting numbers just going side by side competing. And guess what? I didn't have to say anything. The kids get results, and like complete like aha moment.
Right. Yeah. And that's why we timed things like forever now. It's just because of that moment. Like, it was just like that. We had the same thing a couple of years ago where it's just like, do I time them? Do I not time them? I was like, you know what? Screw it. Let's time them so I get the most out of it. And then it's self-serving because then I got a lot of data. I was like, okay, so during this block, they run these times. During these blocks, we run these times. Here's what your max time is. Let's work off of this time. And then like, it's cool because then you're building out a whole system for yourself that's battle tested.
Yeah, and it's, you got the data to validate it, and also the only thing you have to be careful with that again is the athletes, because some kids will hear their number and they'll be upset and they're like, "Oh, I'm gonna beat it this time," and then you've got
And then
like, so you just see their body language just shut down if they ran a slower time, even if it's like 0.01 slower.
I know.
Then do cleanup duty, be like, listen, like as long as you're operating at 95%, like you're good. So it's like,
Right.
of course, try to beat it, but like it's not time to pout and shut down.
No, and that's why sometimes I won't even will time, but we don't show them the times. We just have them written down.
You just write them down. Yeah.
So it's just like next session, it's like, hey guys, like here's like a time that you have to beat, and it might not even be their best time. But I was like, hey guys, let's beat this time this week because that was 95% of their best time. They beat it. It's like, that's a win.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. So anyways, that's entire program laid out by Adam. So again, I'll link up his socials down below on Instagram, obviously on Facebook.
Okay.
Hey, Joe Riggio, what's up, buddy?
What's happening, bro?
Good to see you. But anyways, I'll link up to Adam's Instagram, everything down below. Obviously, tell them a little bit more about the Athlete Code, where they can find you, because you know better than I do. So.
Yeah, for sure. No, I appreciate it again. Thanks for having me on, Josh. It was awesome. So you can just find me on Instagram at Adam, ADM, MENNER, Menner. Adam Menner. It's pretty simple. It's just my name. And then on there, I have all the additional resources. So if you just click that link in my bio, it'll lead you to a page. And that's where we have a lot of our information. So.
Yeah, seriously, go download it. I went in there. I looked at his stuff. Obviously, he has top-notch information. It's backed in science. So you'd be doing yourself a disservice not going to grab that. So seriously, go grab that. Thousands of athletes have already done that. So it's just going to help you out be a better athlete. So if you're going to do that, go ahead, hit that like. I really appreciate you guys checking out the video, and obviously subscribe, and we'll see you next time.